Tree Talking Time is brought to you by Conkey's Outdoors and Stone Creek Hound Supply. Be sure to check them out for all your hound hunting needs. Welcome to Tree Talking Time, where we talk all things tree dogs, from the smallest feists to the largest hounds, treating squirrels to bears and everything in between. And from time to time, we might even run a little fast game.
Because now I can't tell you the people that I've talked to through the years that have complained about how their dog can't track this time of the year.
It does make some sense, yeah.
Well, I think it's got a whole lot to do with the line of dogs you're hunting. You know, I mean, you watch this and see if you don't think this ain't true. You take a puppy, when that puppy gets big enough to go tree a squirrel, for example, if that puppy stands on his head and moves around and, just wallers that track, that puppy will be wallering that track just like that 5 years from now.
Yeah.
The ones that are good, they don't do that. I've noticed that over the years. I can't tell you how many puppies I've started. I don't have no idea. I can tell you this, a whole bunch of them don't make it.
That's been my luck.
Well, you gotta try and stack the odds in your favor to begin with. You're a squirrel hunter, right?
Mostly a coon hunter.
Oh, okay. Well, I know that like this line of dogs, these cur dogs we have,
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell you that. I don't know that I've ever eliminated one. We haven't had that many though. I mean, it ain't like we've had 1,000 puppies on the ground.
Yeah.
But for the amount of puppies that we've had over this probably last 5 generations, these dogs start early.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can recall one. She's dead now, but at 12 weeks old, that pup would tree a squirrel around this yard, and I mean knock the top out of it.
Nice.
Treed hard enough that I took her to Paris, Tennessee, to the NKC World Hunt, and she won their World Train Contest. She barked 100. I want to say it was 148 times. This guy come in. I walked in. It was miserably cold. I walked in when I got done. I walked in that building and got a cup of coffee and was sitting there. This guy come walking in later on. He said, "Hey," he said, "we got a tie." I said, "What do you mean a tie? We got a tie?" He said, "You tied with so and so." He said, "Do you want to flip a coin for it?" I said, "No, sir. I drove like so many hours to get here. I remember what it was. Yeah. I drove so far to get here. No." He said, "Well, we're going to have to do it over." I said, "Well, I guess we're going to have to do it over." He didn't want to go back out. It was so cold.
Yeah.
We went out there and did it over. I think she barked 1 or 2 more barks than him that time.
That's awesome.
But
what dog was that?
That was the one we called Bragg.
Okay.
She was out of Thrasher and a dog called Dixie.
Yeah.
But she was like that from the time she was tiny. At 6 months old, that dog is running tree squirrels and coons consistently.
Mm-hmm. We talked the other day. That cross seemed to be the ticket there.
Well, I've got one up here in the kennel that like 5 generations since, and he's a pretty fair dog. He just turned 2 in August, and he's a pretty fair dog.
Yeah.
Or he wouldn't be eating my feed.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what I say about getting the right dog from the right guy. I'm real particular about where I get a puppy from.
Mm-hmm.
And if a guy don't cull, I'm not probably going to get nothing from him.
Yeah.
Because if he's not able to cull, or he doesn't know how to cull, he's not moving forward.
Yeah.
And then here's the thing, as well as I do, everybody's got an opinion. So you talk to the next guy and he'll tell you, my best dog was at 3 years old. It didn't do nothing until it got 3,
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe so, but I ain't feeding him for 3 years, you know,
I don't
I
blame
got
you.
I've got dogs that'll do it way faster than that, or I won't have them, you
Yeah.
know. Uh, but like I said, I mean, I've listened to a lot of people and a lot of opinions, and I I'm like this. I mean, you can talk to the dumbest guy you've met all day, and if you talk to him long enough, you just might pick something up.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, everybody's got everybody's got something that they're good at. You just got to figure out what they're good at. You know.
Yeah. Very
Uh,
true.
but up there where you're hunting, what you described to me, see, you could take one of these dogs that he's got, and you could tone break that dog. Teach that dog to stay with you. They're not going to hunt it like that if you don't let them.
Yeah.
You know,
Can always bring
uh,
them in.
right? You can't make them go, but you can bring them in.
Yeah.
You know, and that dog will get to where it's kind of like having stock behind the electric fence. If that fence is there long enough, you can take the fence down, and that stock won't go past that point.
Yeah.
They've learned this is how far I can go. You know, kind of the same thing with them dogs. You start bringing him back at 200 or 300 yards, he won't get past there. Once in a while, you might have to remind him, but
Yeah.
not often. But the point the reason I even bring it up is these dogs will tree, and they'll tree hard. You don't got to beg them to tree.
Yeah. Well,
Yep.
they got some good, strong walker genetics in there, so puts a lot of
Well,
that tree in there.
They go back far. If you go all the way back to the beginning, they go back to Doyle Sherman's
Yeah. Jam and Bow.
Jam and Bow dog,
Mm-hmm.
and he was out of a Hard Knockin' Tom.
Yeah.
And they crossed him on Sour's dog. I don't remember her name, but then they got Bo, and they got this. I don't remember that dog's name. That guy sent her here. When that Crusher dog was about 7, 8 months old, he was 7 months old when I took him to the World Show and won that in Indiana. I don't think they would have let him win had they knew he was that young. But he just kept making a cut until we got to the end, and he ended up winning it. But anyhow, this dog that's Tim Lundell. Do you know Tim Lundell out of Wisconsin?
I remember seeing him like on Squirrel Dog Central. I never talked to him.
Well, he called me. This Crusher was a litter mate to Bragg.
Mm-hmm.
And boy, these two young dogs, they were doing a number. And we was hunting them, in different states. So it didn't take very long and people picked up on that. And this Tim Lundell called me, and he said he wanted to breed to my dog. And my dog was like really young.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I'll pay you good. I said, well, it's not the money. I said, I'll tell you what. I said, you go ahead and send your dog here. I'll breed your dog, and then I won't pick of the litter. And he said, okay. So he sent that dog here. She was a full sister to Jam and Bow.
Nice.
And so he sent her here. I bred her to Crusher. And so then I sent her back. She was like, she had won 2 or 3 state titles. She was a coon dog, supposedly. Like Ohio's state dog or Wisconsin's. She had won 2 or 3 big titles. Anyhow, I sent her back. And in between that time, it got to be around January. For some reason, January the 5th sticks in my mind. But I called him to check on them puppies, and his temperature was like 25 below.
Oh, geez.
And I asked him, I said, where you got those puppies at? He said he had them in a doghouse. He said, but I bought one of those heater pads to put in there, you know.
Yeah.
And that I know what it was. That dog was five weeks old, and I told him, I said, "I'll be up tomorrow. I'll be out there to get mine." Anyway, he brought them puppies in, turned them loose on the floor, and this red one was the best looking one of the lot, but he wasn't feeling good, and there was a chance he might have had parvo or corona or something, you know.
Oh, jeez.
And I told him, and I thought about it, and I thought, you know what? If I leave here and that dog lives, I'll always regret that I didn't take that dog. And I told him, I said, well, I'm going to go ahead and take the red one. If he dies, he dies. Well, I took him, and the first thing I did was found me a place to get some Pepto-Bismol. And I started giving him Pepto-Bismol all the way back. And the long story short is he lived.
Nice.
And became a heck of a good dog. But I don't know that he'd have lived had I not went and got him, you know. But I never bred him. You know, I mean, I can look back on it and think, boy, I really messed up.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't breed him, and when he got to be about 7, I was so busy working that I wasn't hunting him right. And I give him to a friend of mine up in Illinois, and he had him for, I'm going to say a dog was probably 12 years old, 11, 12 years old. And I was going to take him, get him and go have him drawn.
Yeah.
So I made arrangements to do that, went up and got the dog, brought the dog back. We took him to the state university, and his sperm count was too low. Mm-hmm. So we didn't get to breed him. And it's a real shame because he was, I'll tell you what, he was about a 55-pound cur dog, but he treed like a hound. He'd treat a last coon up. And, they brought a dog in here. You might remember the dog. It was the big kahuna, they called him. Okay. He was a up and coming walker dog back then. And they called me and wanted to go hunting. And so they brought him in here, and we went out. And the dog I had, when he struck the track. It made a circle like down through this hollow and up the side of this hill, and it crossed this haul road. And when it crossed that haul road, he was so far in front of that walker dog that the screen changed on my Garmin, you know. Mm-hmm. And he come off the other side and come down through that hollow. I mean, he was pushing. I told him, I said, he's either got a deer up or that coon's got to tree. It wasn't long, he fell treed, you know. I'll say this, the big kahuna dog, now he wasn't far behind him when it come time to tree. I don't know that he didn't cut across, but he would take your tree if you let him, you know?
Yeah.
But, I mean, if you're ever going to try a tree and cur, you need to try, you can get one. It don't have to come from John. It just has to come from that bloodline.
Yeah. Well,
you know,
we're a little over 15 minutes into this. So why don't you introduce yourself?
Okay. My name's John Saunders. I'm married to Vicki Saunders for 50 years. I've got 2 sons. I've got, John Jr. and Jason, and 2 granddaughters, Madeline and Macy. And, I started hunting 50 years ago, or 51 maybe, just by chance. It was in 1974. I hadn't been married very long. I was coming down a state highway. And it's a pretty busy highway, a lot of traffic. And I was coming down the road, and I seen this hound standing on the shoulder. And I thought, he's going to get run over. So I went down, I turned around, I come back, and I picked him up. You know, he didn't have a collar on or anything. And I took him to the house. Well, back in those days, if you found something, you put it in the newspaper. And if no one claimed it in 21 days, it became your property. So I put him in a newspaper because I didn't want him, but nobody come to get him. So anyhow, we didn't have a dog. We just got married that year. We didn't have a dog, so I thought, well, I'll just keep him. So I put him in the backyard, and I just treated him like a pet. And one evening, I went over to the farm where my dad lived, and I took that dog, and I just let him loose. Well, we were sitting on his front porch talking, and that dog crossed that gravel road out there and was treed. And I listened to him for a while, and I told my dad, I said, I'm going to go over and see what that dog's doing. And I had never been coon hunting or didn't know anything about it. So I walked over there, and he had a possum up a little old tree, and he was just treeing his head off. And I just reached up there and shook that tree and shook that possum out. Well, he grabbed it up and went to chewing on it. Well, I kind of like that.
Yeah.
And so we went to possum hunting. I didn't know anything else. Him and I just went to hunting possums. We must have killed a couple hundred possums that summer. We was treating possums, and they'd be a possum like little ones all over its back, But we was treating them possums, and I was having a pretty good time doing that. And it got to be Thanksgiving, and we were at my in-laws' house, and a friend of my father-in-law's come in, and this guy coon hunted. And anyhow, he said, well, why don't you go home and get your dog? He said, and go with me tonight. So I did. I went home and I got the dog. I come back and I met him, and he had a blue tick that he had paid $1,000 for, like in 1974. That was unheard of.
Yeah, big money.
Yeah, and so anyway, we went to the woods, and that blue dog treed up on the side of a hill. So we walked in there, got to it, and it was a big hole. And my dog wasn't treeing; he's kind of milling around there. He said, "Catch your dog up." So I caught him up, and I tied him back. He said, "Go down there." He said, "Get that axe out of the back of that truck." So I went down there and got that axe. I brought it back, and he knocked a hole in that hole. And them dogs pulled that coon out and killed that coon. Well, I was hooked. I mean, that was all it took for me.
Yeah.
And I began to coon hunt. And the dog I had was making a pretty good dog. I treed quite a few coons with the dog. And then it got to be a situation where I started to hunt with a few other people. And I remember these were all older people than me at the time.
Okay.
This one guy, he told me, he said, "You want to sell that dog?" I said, "No." He said, "I'll give you $75 for that dog." And I can remember standing there thinking to myself, well, if he's worth $75 to you, he's probably worth more to somebody else. So I didn't sell it. Well, anyhow, I hunted him. And like I said, he treated a lot of coons. And I had hunted him this particular night and brought him in. And the next day, he was just dead. Now, he may have twisted a gut, or sometimes they just die. So I was without a dog again. Well, I went to, I had got word that this guy was wanting to sell this black and tan about 30 miles from me. So I went to this guy's house. He was a little short guy, weighed probably 130 pounds, and he was quite a bit older. At the time I was in my 20s, he was probably 60-ish,
Okay.
Anyhow, I waited for him to get himself ready to go, and he grabbed the shotgun. And I said, "What are you going to do with that shotgun?" He said, I'm going to kill a coon with it. I said, "Well, why don't you use a 22? He said, "I can't see." So we went out there and we got this dog. I bet you this dog weighed 80 pounds. He was like a high 10 black dog,
Yeah.
And that's what they used to call those light colored black and tans back in the day. I ain't so sure this one didn't have some Great Dane in him now. He was sizey, Well, anyway, we went to the woods. This guy took me, and we went about 20 miles, and we went to a spot alongside the interstate. And this dog, when he treed the coon, but I could see the billboard.
There you go.
We was that close to the highway, and so he shot it out with that shotgun. Well, I bought that dog. I brought that big old dog home, and back in them days, you had homemade dog boxes.
Oh yeah.
Well, I loaded him up, and I went to a hunt, and they had a tri-county hunt. And back in those days, if I recall, there was like 75 dogs at that hunt.
Wow.
Yeah. And now 30 of them dogs would have been grade dogs, though.
Mm-hmm.
And they had and you hunted a class of grade dogs.
Yep.
So anyhow, I put him. He wasn't registered. I put him in that hunt, and we was getting ready to go. My brother was with me, and I don't remember why I was talking to somebody or doing something. And here this guy come up with a dog, and he was going to ride with me. I told him to put the dog in that box. Well, we didn't know that this big black dog, he didn't like company.
Oh.
And when he opened that box up to put him in there, that big dog growled. Well, I told my brother, I said, go over there and get that dog's attention, put that other one in there. He walked over, he come back, he said, you go over and put him in there. I said, why? He said, because he tried to bite me. Well, I went over there. I was in my 20s, and I got his attention, and we made it to the woods. Well, long and short of that story is he did place. I want to say I took second in that hunt, and I can still remember bringing that trophy home and putting it on top of the TV. Back in them days, the TV was like a piece of furniture.
Yeah.
And I set that. Yeah, I set that on top of that TV because now I was proud of that.
Mm-hmm.
But it didn't get very good for a while because he wasn't much of a coon dog, and I think I sold him. And but along the way, going to that hunt, I met this guy who lived in the same town I do, and he was about 8 years older than me. I think I was 18. He might have been 10 years older. He might have been 28. But anyhow, he was coon hunting, and so me and him hooked up. And this is how bad it was, Ben. He had a shepherd dog, a little old shepherd dog,
mm-hmm.
and he had a half blue tick and a half bird dog.
Okay.
And the half blue tick bird dog wouldn't tree. The little shepherd dog wouldn't tree either, but he'd jump up and down on a tree. So we hooked a bell to him. So how we knew the dog was treed was that bell ring,
Yeah.
So when we heard that bell ringing, we'd go to him. And sometimes he'd have a coon, So me and this guy, we hunted hard. We really tried. Well, so happened, I guess finally the coon gods smiled on us, and he had won a 30-30 lever action rifle in a raffle. Well, there was this guy, this coon hunter in our county, and he hunted with a guy that didn't have very good dogs because they weren't trained, but they were really well-bred dogs. He would take a Walker dog, a Walker female, and he'd go breed to this year's world champion somewhere, And he had a young dog, and he traded us that young dog for that rifle. And this dog was this one we call Rock, and Rock was out of a dog called Goodwin's Jolly. Well, if you look back that far, Goodwin's Jolly was a Grand Night dog and was in some of the pedigrees. He's in Bozo's pedigree, Hardwood Bozo. So they were at, and then this young dog, his grandparents were like, on one side he had Crowd and Billy. On the other side, he had Diamond Jim. I mean, he was really well bred for that day. Those dogs had all won ACHA World Hunts.
Mm-hmm.
And back in those days, there wasn't but one hunt you wanted to win.
The ACHA.
That was the ACHA. Yeah, that if you won that hunt, you had the best dog in the country that year.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, it was prestigious. And so this dog here was well bred, and we started hunting him. And back in those days, a lot of walker dogs wouldn't tree very well. They would track really good because they weren't very far from being running dogs at that point.
Yeah.
You know, and but this one would. He would stop a tree, and he was a good tree dog. Real fast track dog. Could really drift and cut a track. He was by far the best dog we had up to that point, you know. And so we hunted him a couple years, and I had an uncle who's passed away now, but he wanted to buy a dog, so he ended up buying this dog, and he gave $1,500 for this dog, and I know that's no money today, but that was a lot of money then, you know.
For sure.
So he bought the dog, and he bought the dog with the stipulation that I would handle the dog. So we began to go to a lot of hunts, and we would go to big hunts. I hunted that dog in 2 world hunts, one in Norwalk, Ohio. Now, this is in like the late 70s, early 80s.
Okay.
I hunted him in Norwalk, Ohio, and I hunted him in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. When I hunted him in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, he was the second. The way that hunt was set up, it was a 6-night hunt, and you had to win your cast Monday or Tuesday to advance to Wednesday.
Okay.
If you come out of Wednesday, there were 20 dogs left on Thursday. You know, so I mean, they were really cutting them down.
Mm-hmm.
Anyhow, there was like 640 dogs down there.
Wow.
Well, I ended up. It was on. I made it to Wednesday night that year, and I had the second highest scoring dog going into Wednesday night. Now they would give recognition and trophies and stuff if you were the high scoring dog for the night. He wasn't. He was the second highest scoring dog. But we went into Wednesday night, and in the cast was a dog called Hoss. Hoss belonged to Jarvis Umpers.
Mm-hmm.
And the dog I was hunting, he had treed 2 coons and shut them out. And so anyway, we come to this lake shore, and I could feel that dog I was holding on to. I could feel him leaning towards my left. Well, when he said cast the dogs, I just twisted mine and sent him that way. Well, them 3 dogs went up on the hill, and they got struck and treed, and he went to the left, and he got treed. Well, now he's going to have a 3rd coon that he shut him out on. That black and tan dog quit treeing up there, come off that hill, and just as we walked up to the tree, that black and tan was running that tree and fell off on that walker dog, and that walker dog face barked him, which they scratched him.
Oh wow!
You know, had he done that a second before,
mm-hmm.
or give me a chance to get a hold of him, that wouldn't have happened. And this dog wasn't mean. That other dog was just falling off on him continuously, you know.
Yeah.
So, but it is what it is, you know. So I was out, but the thing of it is that black dog took 3rd in the world hunt that year. Oh, wow. You know, I mean, and I was working on him, mm-hmm. you know. But I mean, if you hunt them hunts, you got to have some luck. You know, it's got to go your way. Now, I hunted a dog. We hunted him all over. I hunted him in Ohio. We took him down to the Grand American one time down in South Carolina.
Yep.
And that was the first big hunt of the year. And we loaded up and took him down there. You know, I drew a black and tan down there. Dog's name was Liza Jane. I never forgot it because I mean she put it on us. I was hunting a pretty good dog. I could handle anybody's dogs. But I'm telling you, that night, that black and tan, she sure put it on them Walker dogs, and mine was in there. And well, for one thing, we was in all that water,
Yeah.
and I guess she knew how to handle that water. That one I had, you know, he was from up here in the hills, so that probably didn't help him. But I ain't making no excuses. That other dog just put it on him, and so when it was finished, I asked the guy. You know, it was a professional handler that had her. I said, would he sell her? And I didn't have the money to buy her, but my uncle did, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so we went back and talked to that guy, and he didn't want to sell her. So we didn't get her bought. And the next time I heard of her, she had been sold to a guy named Ed Abel out in Oklahoma. He had bought a dog called Big Wheel, and he bought Liza Jane, and then he crossed them. And then I never heard no more from her. Mm-hmm. But I don't doubt that the dog didn't throw some really nice dogs, you know, but I just never heard no more about her.
Yeah.
And I didn't hunt black and tan, so I really didn't stay in that loop, mm-hmm. you know.
For sure.
But that Walker dog that I hunted down there, you know, we ended up selling him, but he was several years old when we did. And I got a pup out of him. And that pup I got out of him I still think is the best dog I've ever put a leash on. He was out. We bred that rock dog. We bred him to a real steady coon dog. I mean, she couldn't make the tree as fast as he could, but she was by no means slow, and she was a very consistent dog, you know, and a smart dog. If she had treed 2 or 3 coons and you shot the coon out she was under, if you didn't have her on a chain, she'd go back and get them all, you know. She was a smart dog. Well, this pup that I got out of him, he was probably the most rounded. I mean, I'll tell you a story about him. He was the first time I ever took him hunting. He was 6 months old, and I took him. Me and my uncle took his daddy, and we took that pup and we went hunting. And we went in there, and that pup left. And I thought, well, I'll find him tomorrow, you know. So we went in there and we treated a couple coons and with that old dog, and we were coming back. We're walking out this ridge, and I hear this dog tree off into the right, and he's in there deep. But I mean, he hammered it. So we're walking along, talking and making our way out. And I told him, I said, "Hear that dog in there?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "I wonder whose that is." I said, "I don't know, but ain't he a tree dog?" So we kept walking. We walked a ways, and finally I told him, I said, "Give me that gun." He said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I'm going to go to that dog." I said, "If it's somebody's dog, I'm going to kill that coon. I'm going to go find them. You know, I'm going to give them their dog." Because it was obvious nobody was coming, you know.
Yeah.
I walked in there. I got in there, Ben. That was that pup.
Pup, yeah.
That was that pup. I shot that coon out to him. And he treated like that the rest of his life. You know? He's the only dog I've ever owned that I buried.
Wow.
You know? I mean, he was exceptional. He could take a track, and he could take a rough track, and he would just bark here, and the next time you heard him, he'd be over there. But he'd drift that track through there and get it moving. And now that being said, him and his father, because I trained his daddy too. Mm-hmm. Oh man, were they deer dogs! Wow. I mean, they'd take the breath from a deer. And back in them days, you had no electronics.
Yeah.
So if he got away from you, you had to wait for him to come in somewhere and somebody to call you. And, that'd always be a 3 to 6 day ordeal, you know.
That's rough.
But I finally got him broke. and you had to run them down back in those days.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in pretty good shape. I mean, I could do it, and so I got him. I finally got him broke, and I mean, what a dog! I never hunted that dog a night ever with anybody or anybody's dog that I ever thought, boy, I'm embarrassed. You know, he give you everything he had every night you hunted him.
That's awesome.
You know, friend of mine, he's dead now. Like I said, I hunted with older guys mostly. This guy called me on a cold winter night, and there was like a skiff of snow on the ground for a week. You know, he said, "Come on, let's go hunting." I said, "Man, the coons ain't going to move." He said, "Oh, I got to get out of the house." He said, "I'm getting cabin fever." He said, "Let's take him and go to the woods." So he come by and we loaded up. We went out there. I turned that dog loose. We never heard that. We sat there in that pickup, and it was blistering cold. And never heard a dog crack his head. I told this guy, I said, start this truck up, turn this heater on. My feet's freezing off. He was a Frenchman, and in French, pard means friend. He looks at me and he says, "Oh, pard," he said, "I can't do that." I said, "Why not?" He said, "Because you won't want to get out." I said, "I promise you, I'll get out, turn the heater on, you know." Well, finally, he turned the truck on, warmed it up a little bit, turned it back off. I cracked that window, and I could hear that dog deep in there. I could hear him treat. I told him, I said, "Come on, he's treat." We walked in there to that dog, and he had treated a coon in a den tree. The reason I know that the coon was in there because we cut it out.
Oh wow!
Which brings me to another subject. You know, I hear these guys talking, and they'll talk about the accuracy of their dog. You know, like he's 60%, he's 75% right.
Yeah.
I can tell you this: back in those days, coon hides were worth $20 to $30 a piece. The only way we didn't get a coon is if it got someplace. Short of using dynamite, we got that coon. We twisted him out, we smoked him out, we cut him out, whatever it took, you know.
Yeah.
So I'm going to tell you, we didn't make many slick trees, or the dogs wouldn't be there.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I'm not. You know, somebody tells me they got a dog who's 60% accurate. I'm not walking the 4 empty trees. You know, something's going to change.
Yeah.
Now there'll be people tell you, "Well, get that thermal." I have a thermal. You know, I mean, I can't see inside of a den tree, and I don't cut them no more. You know, but what I am saying is, our dogs didn't slick tree much. I'm not going to tell you they're perfect, and they never did, but it was seldom because we didn't leave him if he was in there. You know.
Mm-hmm.
That gun dog, the one I'm telling you about, this old boy was a big black and tan enthusiast, and he bought this dog. He paid several $1,000s for it. And we were coming through the woods, me and this buddy of mine. We were hunting through the woods, and it was coming out this ridge road, and there was like a caravan of vehicles there. There probably was 6 vehicles. So we stopped and got out. Now, we're in the national forest.
Mm-hmm.
We stop and get out. Well, there's these black and tans are running down in this hollow. So we're standing there talking to them and listening to these dogs. And they're telling us how long these dogs have been there and this and that and the other. And so this guy that I hunted with all the time, he was a short guy with a real mean, gravelly voice. Now, if he was as mean as his voice was, he'd have really been tough. But anyhow, he said, "John, go get Gun out of that truck." I said, "No." I said, "They don't want to hear Gun." He said, and that guy that bought that dog he paid so much for, he said, "Go get him." I said, "No, you don't want to do that." He said, "No." He said, "You think he can tree that coon? Go get him." I went over there and got him. I put him on a lead, and I walked him over there. I waited till that dog opened up down in there. When that dog opened up, I cut him loose. He went in there and he barked one time. The next time he barked, he was over on top of the ridge. The next time he barked, he was treed over the ridge. Mm-hmm. We walked to that dog. Now, this guy's got a whole group of people with him. We walk up to that tree, and it's a den tree. And this guy looks at me and says, I bet he ain't in there. I said, well, why do you think he's not in there? He said, because whatever his dog's name was, he said, he's not treeing. I said, so what does that mean? He said, well, he's not in there. I said, well, you don't know that. And he had about a 12, 13-year-old boy with him. And that boy said, well, if you want me to, Dad, he said, I'll climb up there and look. He said, go ahead. That kid climbed up that tree and looked over in there. He said, he's got him, Dad. I'll give the kid that. The kid could have just lied and said he's not there.
Yeah.
But the kid said, he's got him, Dad. You know? And boy, you talk about a bunch of disappointed black and tan people. You know?
Yeah.
But I mean, he was just that kind of dog.
Conkey's Outdoors is proud to be a sponsor of Tree Talking Time. Family, hunting, tradition is the Conkey's motto. They understand the importance of passing down the tradition of hound hunting. They are a family-owned business that treats you like family. They also understand the importance of having the gear you need when you need it. Conkey's carries everything for your next hunt, and it ships to your door quick. They also offer great warranties on all tracking systems and financing options. Check them out at conkeys.com. You can also use the code TreeTalkingTime5 in all caps to save as well.
Now, when I'm telling you these stories, you got to keep in mind, I hunted 6-7 nights a week, and I did that year round. I did it year round. We hunted all summer. You know, I mean, and that's what makes a dog. I mean, you got to have a good bred dog, but if it don't get a chance, it's never going to reach its full potential.
For sure, yeah.
And well, it's like one time this guy I knew, that Frenchman, he had a litter of puppies, and this guy coming to buy a puppy, and I stand there, and he said, which one of them pups you think is the best one? And Butch looked at him and he said, the one that gets hunted the most part.
Oh, yeah.
Which, I mean, that's absolutely true.
Yeah.
You know, if you don't hunt it, it ain't going to make nothing.
Exactly.
You know?
You can take the best bred pup in the world and you never let it off out of the kennel or off the chain. And you can take a cow dog and make a better coon dog if you hunt it every day.
Right.
You know?
They got to be hunted, you know. I mean, now, like I said, I'm all about doing your homework and trying to get the best dog that suits your style of hunting in your area.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I've taken good dogs from here and taken them to where coons are thick, and they not look good. I've brought dogs from areas where coons are thick and bring them here, and they don't look good. Mm-hmm. Now, that being said, there are the exceptions. That's one thing about Thrasher, Flat Rock Thrasher. He was a dog, you could hunt him in Ohio tonight and win with him, and then you could hunt him in another state tomorrow night, and the dog would have a chance to win. He was competitive wherever you dumped him, mm-hmm. You know, and he could take the pressure. A lot of dogs can't take that pressure.
Oh yeah,
you know, they're hauled all the time. They're fed out of the box. You know, they're just. Well, I remember a Grand Night dog this guy had. He was a coon dog. Now he could give anybody competition. But when we hauled him to a world hunt one time in Ohio, and the dog just fell apart. It wasn't that he did anything bad. The dog would just get like sick.
Yeah,
you know. So he was a good example of one that couldn't take that pressure. You know.
Yeah, some dogs, and even just the traveling, if they're not used to it, you know, my dog out here doesn't travel well. Well,
and you know, now if you hold him all the time, he might.
Yeah.
But he may not either. Some of them just can't take it. Mm-hmm. You know. If I've got one that shows a lot of promise of me taking him to a higher level, he'll spend some time living in that dog box.
Yeah.
I try to cover all the bases, you know, because when I show up thinking I got a good chance to win.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, a lot of people used to go to them hunts because they like the camaraderie, and they just like to have. You know, I've even had people say, "Well, it's a good opportunity for me to train my dog." Yeah, I don't show up for that.
Yeah.
If I'm there, I plan on winning.
Mm-hmm.
You know, or I ain't going to be there. My dog's not ready.
Yeah.
You know, I used to usually train a young dog through coon season, and then after coon season was over and the dog was going good, I'd hunt the dog by himself, and I'd hunt him by himself all the way up into summer, and make him independent. You know, so whenever I got ready to go to a hunt, he was ready to go. You know, but you got to be willing to put that kind of time in one.
Yep.
And you can't be afraid of the dark. If you're afraid to hunt by yourself, you just ain't going to do them good.
Exactly.
You know, I mean, and you'd be amazed at the people who are afraid of the dark. Yeah, I mean, I still say that's the best one I've had. I mean, I've had some good dogs since, but he still, I think, holds that special place.
Yeah. Now, when did you have him?
I had him in the 80s.
Okay.
Like I said, I just never seen the dog that he gave you everything he had. I can remember one night, it was in the summer, this guy had a litter mate to him, and he was a nice dog. But we had treated a coon, and it was hot in the summertime. You know, it was probably still in the 70s, you know, after dark. And we treated this coon, and this guy could swallow coon now. And where I live, coons are thin, you know, always have been. And so we had this coon treat, and anyway, I told him, I said, squall that coon down. We'll run that coon again. And so we tied the dog's back, and he squalled that coon down. That coon hit the ground, it took off. Well, we give it a head start, and we cut them dogs in there. Them dogs went up through there and got over that hill, and we got up there and was listening for him, and we couldn't hear his no more. So we went back, and we got in the Bronco, and we drove down that ridge road, and there was a clear cut there. And around the edge of that clear cut, you know, where they bring them logs in and out. We drove down that road around that clear cut to see if we could hear him in there somewhere. Well, there he laid in the middle of that road. He was unconscious. We picked him up and took him down to a creek and began to try to cool him off. And, you know, that dog couldn't even get out of the dog box for like 3 days. He was that weak. Now, he went ahead and survived it and he lived till he got old. But, I mean, that dog ran till he passed out. Now, mine didn't. I got mine, but, you know, it ain't that he wouldn't have. I think they just had that kind of fortitude, you know. I mean, there was no stop in them. I used to hunt that dog. That dog used to buy Christmas because you could sell them coon hides, and he bought Christmas. And I would, like I said, we hunted all the time. It was Christmas Eve. And my wife never said too much, but she didn't like me hunting on Christmas Eve. And she said, well, what about in the morning? Because we put the presents out and opened them up in the morning. She said, what about in the morning? I said, I'll be back. I'll be back by then. I promise you. So I loaded gun up. I turned him loose after midnight. I turned him loose. He treed. I got headed that way. He was treed across a pretty good sized creek. And I was up a lot higher. I could see that coon sitting in that tree. You could see him at the bottom tree, and, you know, I could see his breath, you know, in that light. I come off of that bluff and got down into that creek. I took my pants off, my shoes, my socks, my pants, because I knew I couldn't wear them wet. and I had a wheat light, and I held that wheat light above my head, and I crossed that water. I held my clothes up there too, and
Yeah.
I crossed that water. I put my clothes back on, went over there and killed that coon. Come back, took my clothes off, crossed that creek, and put them back on, and we come home. I made it in by daylight. You
Ooh.
know,
You are
so
dedicated.
everything was good. You know, well, keep in mind I was a young guy, so I mean I had a lot more go, but in my mind. It was a situation. If he was dog enough to tree it, I was man enough to go to him.
Hmm.
You know, yeah. If you're not willing to go to your dog, you don't need him. You know, and that's just kind of the way him and I operated. And that's why he's the only one I ever buried.
Yeah.
But like I said, after that, I mean that was in the '80s. After that, I've had some pretty good dogs. I don't know that I've ever had anything that would equal him. I was telling you the other day, some of the dogs that I've had that were better than average. Now a lot of times in between these dogs, I had dogs I was training
Yeah.
and I would sell. Like people would call me in the fall and say, "Have you got anything you'd sell?" Well, if I sold somebody a dog, it would run and tree a coon.
Hmm.
I mean, or it wasn't for sale. It's just that they weren't competition type dogs, maybe.
Yeah.
And so I would sell dogs to people, in different states and what have you. And so I always had a dog I was messing with. I was always training, and I guess it must have been in the '90s, early '90s, maybe even in the late '80s. Yeah, remember me telling you about that red bone?
Yeah.
Well, I'll go ahead and tell that story because I think it's a good story.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not a red bone fan. I had never hunted. What few red bones I had hunted with because they're not popular in my part of the country.
You would think they
And
would be.
well, back in the day, you had people hunted. These people hunted blue ticks and black and tans, and then crosses. There wasn't that many people hunted Walker dogs, 50 years ago.
Yeah.
But nobody hunted red bones. And anyway, this one here, Harold Hoffmeister is a red bone breeder. Now, Harold's in his 90s. I just talked to him about a month ago. I think he's 93. But Harold raised and trained red bones, and he had a dog called Rusty Red, and evidently he must have been a good one. And well, they AI'd that dog, and he used it. He used that on some female he had, and he had befriended my oldest son John
Hmm.
at those hunts, and he took a liking to John, and so he called and he asked John. He said, "If you want this pup," it was about 6 months old. He said, "I've decided I'll sell her to you." So I took him over there, and we looked at this dog and standing there talking. This dog sat there on that chain, and this dog just kind of looked off and didn't act like a puppy. You know how puppy wants to be petted and hanging on the end of a chain or on the pin or whatever.
Yeah.
This one didn't. It just sat there that wasn't shy. I mean, you could
Didn't
walk
care.
up and pet it. It wasn't shy at all, but it did not have any want for you to touch it. And I thought he would say no, he didn't want it. I said, "Well, do you want this dog?" I said, "If you do, say so because I'm getting ready to go." And he said, "Well, yeah, Dad." He said, "I'd kind of like to have her." Well, so I paid the man. We took her home, and when he was young, he's not that way now. But when he was young, he didn't want to mess with a dog that wasn't going. If you got it where it would run a tree, he'd hunt the hair off of it. But he didn't want to mess with him to get him going. This pup got to be about 8 months old, and so it was up to me to get it started. And I'd take this pup out. It was late in the winter. It was after coon season. I'd take this pup out, turn it loose like maybe at 2 a.m. And at first, when it smelled a coon track, I try to help it, stay behind it, and encourage it. We did that a few times, and finally, after a couple times, there was a coon at the end of it, and I shot it. Well, it just progressed. Anyhow, it comes summertime, and kitten coons were on the water. And I called these two buddies of mine, and I said, hey, let's go hunt tonight. I want to show you this redbone. Because nobody had a very high opinion of redbones,
Yeah.
And so we go to the creek, and their dogs are treeing these kitten coons. Well, my dog's acting like an idiot. It won't tree. It just acts stupid. Anyhow, I was pretty depressed over that, but I didn't get rid of it. And it turned out I discovered this dog was independent. It wouldn't tree with another dog. Never did in its life.
And that's a time when independence wasn't really a common thing.
No, because dogs packed back then. Mm-hmm. It was who could get their dog treed first got the plus points. Well, this one wouldn't tree with anything. I just discovered this as it went along. Now, something could come and tree with it, and it was fine. It wasn't like that it was mean or anything. It just was not going to go to another dog and tree. And so when I discovered that, then that's kind of the way this went. And, I'd be sitting around a clubhouse somewhere, and I'd hear somebody talking about Old Blue and how Old Blue was just straight. He was just born that way.
Yep.
Well, I never believed that, Ben. In my mind, I thought, well, Old Blue's just too lazy to go do something, But then this redbone, this dog was just born straight. It wouldn't tree a possum. It just would not mess with anything other than a coon. And I didn't break it. I never tried to break the dog because there was no reason to. Mm-hmm. We were hunting over in Illinois with Bud Stretch, and Bud had two young Walker dogs, and they had a possum in a hollow, and they were stretching it. And she come through, and when she come through, that dog stopped and looked at them and went right on out the other side and went in there and treated a coon. And I can't take the credit for it because I didn't do nothing to the dog, mm-hmm. But she was the kind of dog, like I said, coons are thin here. She was the kind of dog, when you cut her, she went into the dark. Now, she didn't blow in there. She just left. And when you found her, she'd be under a tree. Now, it didn't matter how far it took her to find one, mm-hmm. but she was a real independent type of a dog. And some guy had heard about her down in Florida. And he called and asked me if I'd sell her, and I put a price on her, which I thought was too high. And he said, well, I'll send somebody for her. And he sent the money to my account, The dog went down there and grinded out, and that was the last I heard of her, But there's a good example of you can always learn something,
Yeah.
You would not, there's no way I'd have believed that had I not seen it myself, But it says something for that guy's breeding program, Now, I don't think he breeds dogs anymore. He's too old.
Yeah.
But if I were going to get another redbone, I'd try one of them, Mm-hmm. Because, like I say, she was deep and lonely when that wasn't popular.
Yeah.
After I guess after her is when them. Now, John had always been into them cur dogs, them squirrel dogs.
Yeah.
And when we made that cross on that flat rock thrasher dog, and got them pups out of there, the female dog treated a lot of coons and did a nice job of it. Mm-hmm. The male dog, he wasn't crazy about a coon. That didn't trip his trigger. But he liked squirrels. And I'm talking when this dog was like, 8 months old, something like that.
Yeah.
Uh, I'd turn that dog loose in the daytime, and that dog would run and tree a squirrel. It wouldn't take him very long. He'd have one treat, and a hard tree dog. But as soon as he seen or heard another one, he'd leave that tree and go to that one. And he would just continue to do that, you know. And it got so bad that when somebody'd say, they'd ask me, they'd say, "What dog you taking?" Because if he was taking Crusher, they wasn't going, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was standing there one day with two or three people, and when he turned him loose, he kind of remember that movie with Chevy Chase where they moved to the country and they bought that Irish setter and he'd come through about once a month. That's kind of how this dog was. I mean, he'd be gone, and when it'd be an hour or so, he'd come through. But when he come through, he wouldn't come close enough for you to catch him, and he'd come through in a lope, like a coyote.
Yeah.
And that particular time, I got in a position where when he come by, I just jumped out and tackled him. And I was knelt down there holding him, and I could feel his heart pumping in his chest. And somebody standing there with me said, "You ought to kill him." I said, "No." I said, "If I ever get all of this energy in the right direction, he'll be something." Well, that went on, and there was some guys here from out of state to squirrel hunt with John. And he called me and he said, "Dad," he said, "somebody's here from Wisconsin and somebody's here from, Georgia or something." And he said, "I can't hunt. I can't take them all hunting." He said, "Would you take the guy from Wisconsin?" And I said, "Yeah." So I loaded this dog up. We go out, turn him loose. This dog gets in there. He's deep. He gets in there and he's treed. And like I said, he was a hard tree dog. And that guy was going to go with me. I told him, I said, "You might as well stay here." He said, "Why?" I said, "Because that dog's deep." I said, "And there's a really good chance that dog's not going to stay." So he stayed at the truck. Well, I started walking in there. I walked and walked, and I'd stop and I'd listen. I could still hear him. I got in there to him, and he was treed. I got in there to him, and I looked that tree over, and I seen a squirrel up in that tree. I shot that squirrel out. From that day forward, that dog never left another tree.
Just
I don't. It
just clicked.
That's just what the light switch come on.
Yeah.
And when it did, I've never been to the woods with a better squirrel dog. I would stand there and look at my watch and cut him loose, and in 60 seconds, that dog could be treed over on the side of the next hill and have something.
Mm-hmm.
He just had the ability to throw his head up in the air.
Yeah.
He was one heck of a squirrel dog. It's a shame he got killed, because he got killed about 2 weeks before going to the world hunt.
Yeah.
But he was a good one. When we're talking like this, different dogs come to mind. I've had dogs that, there ain't no two of them alike.
No.
I had it, and I didn't buy this dog. I didn't raise this dog and train it. I bought this dog. I bought a dog in between some of my own dogs. I bought a dog out of Neosho River Razor. Okay. You ever heard of him? Well, he was a pretty popular dog down in the southwest part of Missouri. Anyway, I bought this dog, and this dog he was a pretty good looking hound, walker dog, and good tree dog. When you cut him loose, you'd find him under a tree, and sometimes it would be a mile in there.
Mm-hmm.
He was a coon dog, but he was so hard to hunt. And at least back then, though, I had a wildlife,
mm-hmm.
Beat collar. And so, I could find him. It just wasn't like it is nowadays. But, he was so rough to hunt. I would take and cast him in, and I'd take another dog, and I'd go hunt for 2-3 hours somewhere completely different. And then on my way home, I'd come through that country and find him and go kill his coon and come on to the house. You know,
Jeez.
He was hard to hunt now. He was a good one, but he was hard to hunt. And I sold him to a guy. And he was telling me that well, let me back up a minute. I had that dog, Harold Hoffmeister called me, and it was another one of them really bad cold winter nights when, I mean, nothing was moving. And he said, "You want to go hunt tonight?" And I said, "No." He said, "Well, come on and go." He said, "Mark Zepp's coming in." He said, and him and Mark Zepp were buddies.
Yeah.
And so Mark was coming in, and he was going to take some pictures of Harold's stud dog. And anyhow, I agreed I'd go with him. So I met him. We hunted that red bone for about an hour or so, and he never got struck. And he said, "Turn that walker dog out." I turned that walker dog out, and about an hour went by, and I heard him come treed way in there, deep enough we had to get in the truck, drive to a road, drive up a highway, you know, that type of thing.
Yeah.
We got in there, and he was treed. So Zepp, you know, he takes the pictures. Well, he takes pictures of this walker dog too. And so this walker dog ends up being on the back of a full crying American Cooner. You know, he's in a Tritronics ad.
Mm-hmm.
So he's done become a movie star, you know. and so this guy I sell him to, he loses him. And when he finds the dog, like, you know, 2 or 3 days later, somebody has picked this dog up and they've taken him to the local dog pound and turned him in. Well, when this guy found him, they were 24 hours from castrating this guy's dog. You know, I mean, he was just so hard to hunt.
Yep.
One time he found him, somebody had found him on the road and tied him up to a tree with a necktie. You know, I mean, he was a handful, but he was a coon dog. I'll give him that. Now you didn't go to nothing. I never walked anything that there wasn't a coon sitting there. You know.
Yeah.
So I mean, that kind of brings me up to where I'm at now. You know, I've got a tree and cur, like I said, goes back about 5 generations to those original pair.
Mm-hmm.
And he just turned 2 years old, and I hunted him last coon season, and he's a pretty nice dog. And then I've got two young dogs. One just turned 12 months old. The other one's 5. They're out of the same father, a dog called Devil Ants. I want to say Steve Ant may have been hunting him. He won about 40,000.
Nice.
And he's those really nice tree dogs, real clean, hard tree dogs. And so I've got 2 of them that I'm messing with now, and hopefully there'll be a special one in there, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, I'm always messing with something. Once one gets finished, it's not that I can't appreciate them. I don't know. I guess it's just that I'm always thinking the grass is greener. Yeah. You know,
you like the process.
Yeah, I suppose I do. You know, it's exciting when you see a dog make his first tree.
Mm-hmm.
You know, or you know, backing up to that gun dog when he was a young dog, I turned him loose at like 3:00 in the morning, and he got struck, and that coon went through a clear cut. And these clear cuts vary in size, but what they do is they come in there and they cut all the marketable timber out, and then they cut all the under brush out, all the trees. So you got all these treetops laying there. Yeah. It's just a really rough place.
Oh, yeah.
I turned that dog loose at 3:00. He got struck, and that coon went through there. That dog treed. Now, he was a young dog. He treed, and I walked in there to him, and he was treed on a top. I got him off of that and sent him on. he did that 3 times going through that clear cut. And at 7:00 the next morning, I shot that coon out to him on the other side of that clear cut. You know, that dog never hit a clear cut again when he that he didn't get through. When he would get a coon in a clear cut,
Yeah.
he wouldn't say nothing until he brought him out the other side. You know, I mean, it didn't take him very long to figure out how to move him out of there.
Yeah.
You know,
Learned.
but you know, he was sharp enough to do that. I mean, I have had some that stay in there and stay in there till they died.
Yeah.
You know,
Like you said, wallow around in there.
Yeah.
So,
Smart dog learn to shut up.
mm-hmm.
You know, everybody's got their own preference and their own way of doing things. I mean, there are some people who like to listen to a dog run track.
Oh, yeah.
I like a dog with a good mouth, good track mouth, but I don't want him to use it a lot. Be somewhere different every time you open. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not into that sitting there, you know, for an hour listening to it. There's other things to be done, you know.
Yeah.
But I mean, as far as like training dogs, training pups, you know, you can talk to 10 people and everybody's going to have a different way of doing it.
Yeah.
Some people think their way is the only way, but that's incorrect. You know, it's what works for you. You know, there are people who won't show a dog a cage coon. Well, I ain't saying ruin your dog with it, but I can't tell you the dogs that I've showed a coon or two turning them loose out of a cage, you know, across the field.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you're starting them. Now, I ain't much for, you know, showing one too much. I think it, you know, well, a lot just depends on the dog that you're dealing with.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, and you know, when I think about it, I know that the methods that I used were because of the people that I hunted with when I started. You know, I mean, if that's the way they did it, well, that's the way I learned it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I said, you just gotta be. At some point, you got to be smart enough to decide what works and what don't. Because I can remember I had a dog years ago, a good solid coon dog. Treed a lot of coons with that dog. You couldn't beg that dog to tree a coon in the cage.
Yeah.
It absolutely did not care. But it was a heck of a coon dog, you know? So, I mean, I guess she was smart enough to know that she wasn't going to get nothing out of that.
Yep.
You know? So,
exactly.
I know that I've enjoyed the past 50 years hunting coon hounds. I've met a lot of people. You know, I've been to a lot of places because of it. You know, it's been good to me.
Yeah.
I still have acquaintances, you know, in different places. I will say this now at 69, you know, like I said, I always hunted and run around with people older than myself. So most of the people that I know that coon hunted or I coon hunted with, they're either gone or they can't physically do it no more, you know? So, I mean, it's all changed. When I was president of the Coon Club here in this county, mm-hmm. Whenever I give that up, we had 75 members.
Wow. It's a big coon
you
club.
Know, we had coon. I don't know how many coon hunters was in this county. I mean, I'm surprised there was a coon to run, you know?
Yeah.
There must have been a bunch of them didn't have very good coon dogs because they would have eradicated them, you know? But sure enough, there were 75 people in that club. I can remember going to these to these local hunts, within 50 miles of here. There's a club called Bourbon over on Interstate 44. And you go over to Bourbon, they have 75 dogs.
Man.
I
Can't
mean,
imagine that. Just at a local hunt.
well, and just think of the competition. I mean, like that rock dog, that Walker dog.
Mm-hmm.
I made him a Grand Night champion, and it never lost a cast. I mean, and there'd be like 75 dogs.
Yeah.
At the least there would be 35 or 40 dogs in a hunt.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was just a lot tougher to make a Grand Night dog then.
Yeah.
But I didn't take them till they were ready to win either. I wasn't trying to train them at the hunts.
Yep.
And that makes a big difference. And I'll say this, that even though he's not the best one, that it would have been his son that was, but he was the kind of dog that could dominate a cast. I mean, he was a third, fourth strike dog. He wasn't a first strike dog, but he was an absolute first tree dog. And when that dog come on tree, he'd come on with a long locate. I'd tree that dog before he got finished with that locate.
Nice.
Because right, wrong, or indifferent, he was there. He was hard to beat.
Stone Creek Hound Supply, a family-operated business, boasts over 50 years of involvement in hounds. For over 2 decades, they've been dedicated to supplying high-quality hound gear. Their reputation is founded on unparalleled quality and exceptional customer service. Crafted from U.S. source materials, Stone Creek clothing is meticulously manufactured right here in Pennsylvania. Through their commitment to excellence, many of their customers have become lifelong friends. Use the code TreeTalkinTime15 to save on all your purchases.
I had him down in Mississippi in a PCA hunt. Back then, when it started, it was PCA. It wasn't PKC. I had him down in Mississippi. We were hunting in about 6 inches of water all night. And that dog I got, he was from up here in these hills. Like I said, he wasn't used to all that water to begin with. He'd get in there and he'd take their coon from them, see? And he'd done that 2 or 3 times to them. And he'd come by us in the dark. We're standing there with our lights off. He'd come by us out there, and you could hear him snarting his lips, he's popping them lips on top of that water. And that one guy was so frustrated, he said, "You got to strike that dog." I said, "Why?" He said, "He's opening." I said, "Mister, he ain't opening. I'll tell you when he opens." It wasn't very long. He let out a big locate. I said, "Strike and tree rock." I said, "Now he's open." He would just rob you,
Yeah.
But he was something. I mean, he was until I got that offspring off of him. He was the best I'd been to the woods with.
Yep.
We were lucky here. I mean, there were some good dogs in this area, and there was there were some people that were willing to help you. I remember one of the first hunts I was in, that guy that I told you was a Frenchman.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. This rock dog tree, we drew out in the same cast. This rock dog treed, and they treed in a big tree in the summertime at the edge of like a throwed out field. And anyway, it was up to me to find that coon. Well, them other 2 guys, they weren't going to help you find no coon.
Yeah.
And this guy got himself out there in the edge of that field and went to looking. And now this guy was a coon hunter. Now he hunted as hard as anybody I've ever known. He hollered over there. He said, "Hey, pard," he said, "come here. Here's your coon." Well, that was the beginning of a lifelong friendship.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because we buddied up after that, and he probably had the best blue tick I've ever been to the woods with.
Nice.
That dog grinded out and never lost a cast. This guy was about 6'3", probably weighed 240 pounds when he was young. First time I ever hunted with him, he shot a coon. That coon was up in a squirrel's nest,
mm-hmm.
and the coon didn't fall out.
Oh.
he climbed up that tree. I bet you it was 20 foot to the first branch.
Jeez.
You know, it's a big old black oak.
Mm-hmm.
He was strong now. He was a big man. He could climb like a monkey, you know. He climbed up there and threw that coon out. I mean, he was a horse now. And he worked in the mines, and the guy'd get off like he worked a second shift and get off like at midnight.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times I'd meet him somewhere and we'd hunt to daylight. I mean, he did that all the time.
Yeah.
And he never would refuse you. I don't care what. There could be a tornado going through. If you called him and said, "Hey, you want to go hunting?" He'd go. You know, he'd help you train your dog just like he trained his too.
Yep.
But I will tell you this: I don't care what he had. It'd tree a coon.
Mm-hmm.
I believe he could have made a Chihuahua tree a coon. You know.
Yep.
He just was that kind of a dedicated hunter, you know. We used to take John when he was a little boy, you know, when he was like 12, 13, because John always hunted. He always loved to go hunting. And Butch would give him a scorecard. They'd go to the woods and they'd play like they was in a cast.
Yeah.
So by the time John got to be old enough to drive, John was hard to beat. You know, he knew the rules. He knew how to apply them.
Mm-hmm.
And they weren't gonna mess him around either. I had an English dog that I ended up getting for him. Well, I trained it, but he had a pretty tough English dog, and he got old enough he could drive.
Yep.
He started hitting a lot of hunts.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that the English dog he had got run over on Halloween night, whatever year that was.
Yeah.
That dog was like 18 months old, and he was like one win from being dual grand champion.
Yeah.
And he had won.
The episode John was on, I think it was episode 58. He talked about Chief.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
Yeah. Did he tell you about Chief's dad?
Don't think so.
There was a dog coming here, an English dog. And they called him Jim. And Jim had to be one of three of the fastest track dogs I've ever listened to. I mean, Jim did not hit a rough track. Other dogs could be standing on their head, couldn't move it out. Put Jim in there. Mm-hmm. It wouldn't be but a little bit. Now it was moving, you know. Was a good little tree dog. His hole was when he seen you get close to the tree, he'd leave and he'd just take off. Well, the next time you heard him, he'd be opening on a coon. He'd go tree it too. Now when he treed, I mean, you could let him tree for an hour. It wasn't like he was treeing and leaving. He just didn't want you to get him.
Yeah.
And I never could figure that out, except maybe they were trying to break the dog from treeing with another dog at one time.
Yeah.
And running him off or, whipping him and trying to run him off so he wouldn't come in a tree. I kind of suspect something like that must have happened to the dog.
Yeah.
Because of the way he did. But I had a red tick female. I ended up selling her. She was all right. She was a really nice tree dog. She was just an ordinary dog, though. I ended up selling her to Leroy Penny when Kojak was big.
Okay.
I sold her to Leroy Penny, but I bred her to that Jim dog, and that's where we got Chief. And like I said, John wasn't much on starting him, but I started that pup, and he was 8, 9 months old. I told John, I said, "Come on and go hunting with me." I said, "I want to show you this dog." So he went. We turned that dog loose, and the dog got in there pretty deep. He got struck and he got treed, and he was a good tree dog. And I told we were sitting there, and he said, "I'm going to take that gun and go kill that coon." So he left. He went in there and got the dog and killed the coon and come back out. Well, guess what? It wasn't my dog no more.
Yeah.
And then he took it. He just hunted the heck out of that dog.
Mm-hmm.
All you had to do was get a tree in. Now he's become a lot better dog trainer now. Obviously,
Yeah.
he trains his own dogs. But I mean, boy, when he was a kid, he didn't.
He did credit you in that podcast. He said, "My dad kept me in a good coon dog."
Well, he just didn't have the patience when he was younger.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, I'm telling you, Ben, you'd had to see him when he was little. When he was like, 5, he'd start off in the evening because he knew that I was going to go hunting.
Mm-hmm.
And either this guy'd come and pick me up or I'd go to his house and we'd leave from there. But he about 4 o'clock, he would start off diplomatic. He'd be like, "Can I go?" And I'd tell him no. And finally, whenever we'd be leaving, he'd be losing it then. He'd be like hanging on the fence in the front yard, But finally, I started taking him, and he was little enough, like when that dog would strike, I'd sit down by a tree, and back in those days, I chewed tobacco. I'd put a chew of tobacco in my lip, and I'd sit down, and we didn't have the clothes that you got now for the weather. He had like one of them little old snow suits or something. Yeah. But I can remember him small enough that I would sit down, he would sit between my legs, and I would kind of wrap my arms around him, to keep him warm.
Yeah.
And he'd fall asleep. And when that dog got treed, I'd wake him up, and boy, he was ready to go now. He was anxious to get there, and we'd walk into the tree, and he was too little to shoot the gun. Finally, I started letting him take a BB gun, and he would shoot at it with that BB gun, and then finally I'd have to knock it out. But I mean, he was like obsessed with it.
Yeah.
Shoot, I'd never seen a kid so bad as him.
That's awesome.
Gun treed a coon one night. We walked to the tree, and it was in a hole, but it had a crack in the side. And you could see that coon when you shine your light in there. You could see it, coon sitting in the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
I told him, I said, "Come on, let's go get another one." He said, "No, let's get this one out." I said, "John, we can go get another coon faster than we can get this one out. Come on." Well, he just insisted. And my dad had given him one of those little old cheap survival knives, like you open the top and it's got like a saw in it or something.
Yeah.
I finally just went over and sat down. I told him, I said, "Well, have at it." And I thought, well, he'll mess around, till he gets tired, and then we'll go. Because that's kind of the way you had to handle him, And so I sat down, and he got out his little saw, and he sawed and broke that. And then he got off something, he got all the stuff out of that top of that knife. And finally, he had the point of that knife trying to dig a hole in that or something. I think broke the tip of it off. But he was completely out of tools,
Yeah.
And when we was walking away, the kid was crying, because he didn't get the coon. Brother, was he committed?
Yep.
But I mean, now he hunts by himself, and which I do too. Nobody hunts together anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got enough dogs we can't hunt together. Sometimes I wish we didn't, but I can remember like when he was a kid, we hunted together all the time, and he was always game. Now he was always ready to go. And those are the good memories.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, now he's got dogs, he's got to hunt, and I got dogs, I got to hunt.
Yep.
Sometimes I meet him, he's coming in from squirrel hunting, and I'm going out coon hunting.
Yep.
It's all changed now. I mean, and people don't want dogs anymore that hunt together.
Yeah.
Even the dogs I've got won't hunt together. If I turn them loose together, they won't be together.
Going opposite directions.
Yeah. I mean, the whole thing's changed. The dogs have changed. The way the dogs are have changed to meet the requirements of the registries.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, Well, whenever it's like when UKC went to 125 tree points.
Mm-hmm.
It used to be 100 and 100. They went to 125 tree points. Well, when they did, them walker dogs went slip tree and terrible.
Yeah.
Because they were putting so much emphasis on that tree. And although I really like a really nice tree dog, it's got to be able to get that coon to the tree.
Yep. For sure.
It's just well, one good thing though is the technology. I mean, where I used to drive around and get to the top of a tall hill, I mean, we live in the Ozarks here. Some of these are pretty tall.
Yeah.
And when you just have to drive to a high spot and listen, see if you could hear him. And I usually had my dogs trained to where that if I left a jacket or a coat or something, they'd come back to it and lay down on it. I could pick them up the next day. And I did that a time or two until they stole my jacket. And then I figured out, well, I can't leave my clothes here. Yeah. I won't have any. So I began to take an old tow sack. I'd throw it in the dog box with a straw.
Mm-hmm.
And if I had to leave something, I'd leave it,
Gotcha.
And an old Gun, if you lost Gun and couldn't find him, there wasn't no sense in being there at daylight because he wasn't going to be there. If you come an hour or so after daylight, he'd give him time to leave the tree, you know. But he'd tree to daylight, I've had several dogs with tree all night like that.
Mm-hmm.
If they won't stay treed, I probably ain't going to have them.
Yeah.
But I've been blessed. I mean, I've had the opportunity to hunt with some really good dogs, and and I do believe this: you're going to judge the dogs that you hunt by the best you've ever been with.
For sure. Yeah.
And if a guy's never had the opportunity to hunt with a really high end dog, you won't know that.
Yeah.
But once again, I figured this out real early. If that guy's feeding it and he's happy with it, it tickles me,
Mm-hmm.
Because I've seen some of them I wouldn't have fed, but they weren't mine. So, I was in a cast one time and a guy with that Frenchman, and this guy was outspoken too. And this other guy asked him, he said, "Hey Butch," the cast was over. He said, "Hey Butch," he said, "what do you think of my dog?" And Butch said, "Oh, Bart," he said, I don't really know. I don't want to say nothing." He said, "No, come on, Butch." He said, I respect your opinion." Butch looked at him and shook his head. He said, "Bart, if I had to hunt something like that," he said, "I'd go buy a fishing pole." I was like, "Well, I'm glad you took it easy on me, Butch."
Yeah.
Well, one dog just come to mind. One of these deals where you think, well, why? I was fishing. I lived in a house and there was a lake not too far behind it. I was fishing there one summer evening, and here come two young English dogs, a red tick and a blue tick, and they were running a rabbit around that edge of that lake. And so anyway, when I left, they followed me back to the house. Well, I lived on a highway, so I figured they must belong to somebody, not too far away.
Yeah.
So I loaded them up and I went down the highway and I just started asking people if these are your dogs. Well, I didn't go too far and I found this old boy and he said, "Yeah, those were his." And they were young dogs. And so he took his dogs. Well, I don't know, a day or so went by. This guy comes to my house and he says, "Hey," he says, "you want them dogs?" I said, "No, I got dogs." He said, "Well, I'll give them to you." I said, "Well, if you're going to give them to me, yeah, I'll take them." So I took them, and I had somebody I knew I could sell the red tick female to. So I just immediately got rid of her, and so I got this blue dog, and I'll never forget these dogs had not been taken care of, and this dog had been hungry. You could take and throw this dog vegetables, like throw him a whole tomato. He'd eat it,
Yeah.
you know. Anyhow, coon season come around, and I was hunting him, and I was hunting him with gun. And this dog would mill around a tree. He wouldn't lock up and stay tree. Gun had a coon, and he's over there on the hillside milling around. Well, I just went ahead and shot the coon. I left him. And so about 3 days went by. And I thought, well, I'll hunt back through there again. So I hunted Gun back through there. Well, Gun got struck, and he opened up, and he ran through there, and he come treed. And, I was walking to that dog treed, and here come this English dog. He come into that walker dog, and he treed. And, I shot that coon out, and I brought the English dog back with me. That dog never milled again.
You learned.
I guess 3 days in the woods was enough for him.
Yep.
But I mean, it makes me wonder why. I mean, because most dogs that are bad to mill, that's genetic. They're just not good tree dogs.
Yeah.
But there's another one that I really don't have a good answer, and I can't take responsibility for it because I was like this. Look, if I don't ever see you again, I'm fine. By gosh, she wanted to come home. And after that, I can't tell you the coons I treated with that dog walking to Gun because Gun would hunt deep.
Yeah.
And I've treated coons going to Gun with that dog.
Mm-hmm.
He made a pretty nice dog. Goes to show you, there's a dog there, and I don't know how he was bred. He could have been bred good. I don't have no idea. He was all hound.
Yeah.
But, there's a good example there of a dog that just got a chance.
Yeah.
Somebody give it a chance, and I've seen that happen a few times. Years ago, when I was hunting that rock dog, that walker dog, like I said, I hunted him all over the country, and I hunted him against the best there was in the world then. And about 60 miles from here, my uncle lived, and I went to this pleasure hunt with him. And I hunted whatever I hunted in them hunts. I hunted all week,
Mm-hmm.
Well, I went down there and got with him, and we went down the road. We went to this farmer's house, and there was a red dog with a white chest and white feet laying on the porch. He was half walker.
Okay.
And he's laying on this guy's front porch. And I'll never forget this guy's last name was Stagner. And he said, "Do you mind if I take Red?" And I said, "I don't care." And I really didn't. Because I just figured that this walker dog I had, it didn't make no difference. He was going to do what he was going to do, and if this dog had an effect on him, me and that walker dog would have had a problem,
Mm-hmm.
Well, this guy hit his dog off the porch. We go to the woods. I think I treated 3 coons with that walker dog. That red dog treated 3 coons of his own too.
Wow.
That walker dog or that red dog, he was as good as that walker dog I was hunting, and I had hunted him in world hunts and stuff. And I told that old man, I said, "Do you want to sell that dog?" And no, I didn't want to sell him. I said, "Listen, if you ever change your mind, call my uncle and let him know." About a year went by, and my uncle called and said, "Hey, Stagner wants to sell that dog. Do you still want him?" I said, "Yeah, I'll take him." I went and got him, and the only reason that I didn't keep that dog and I sold him was he had shot possums to him, and you couldn't stop him from treeing possums.
Yeah.
But I'm telling you, had he not treed possums, wow. They talk about these X-bred dogs now, Ben.
Mm-hmm.
Had there been an X-bred situation back then, oh shoot, I can think of 2 or 3 crossed-up dogs that were coon dogs. That was one of them. My gosh, he was a good one. He just would not leave them possums alone, and so he gets you scratched out. But there was some of them when they'd cross them on them walker dogs. I can remember a black and tan. that was crossing a Walker dog. And when I hunted with him, he was old, and these two boys had him, these two twins. Anyway, we went to the woods, and first tree, the black dog tree, we went there, and he had a coon. The next tree, the Walker dog, the other Walker dog tree had a coon. Black dog wasn't there. We never come back. I said, "Where's your dog at?" They said, "Oh, he went home." I said, "What do you mean he went home?" They said, "If that other dog tree's before him," I said, "he'll leave. He won't be here." I bet they lived 4 miles from where we was hunting. When I let them boys off at their house, that black dog was laying on the front porch.
Crazy.
I mean, he just wasn't going to take it. You know, I mean, it just amazes me some of the things I've seen. You know, one time this guy asked me, he said, "Come and go hunting." I get down there. He lives by a refuge. It's a swamp. It's called Mingo Swamp, and it's one of the few swamps left in Missouri. You know, down towards the Boot Hill. And I don't know if you're familiar at all with Missouri, but when you get in the when you get in the southeastern part of it, it's flat like Kansas.
Okay.
You know, I mean, it's just flat as far as you can see, and there are a couple swamps down there. Well, anyway, he lived right up against that swamp. And I asked him, I said, "Hey, Jimmy," I said, "you guys got any rattlesnakes down here?" He said, "Oh, no, Johnny." He said, "We don't have no rattlesnakes." Well, we're walking along. John's walking behind me. And we stopped to listen to the dog's tree. And we stopped and turned our lights off. And just before I turned my light off, John goes, "Don't move, Dad." Well, when he said that, I knew there was a snake close to me. I said, "Where's he at?" He said, "You just stepped over him." And so this snake is coiled up, and he's about 2 foot from my leg.
Ooh.
And now he's not rattling; he's just coiled up. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking, now if I move, is that going to cause him to strike? But on the other hand, I can't stand there all night either. You know. So finally, I told him, I said, "Well, I'm going to step away from him," and I did it. I tried to do it without jumping, just step away. And I stepped away. Well, when I did, you know, that gave me another 3 feet. So I was far enough away from him, you know. And I told that guy, I said, "Give me that gun." He said, "But first I'm going to kill a snake." He said, "Oh, you can't kill a snake here." He said, "We'll have them agents or whatever they wore down here on us, you know."
Yep.
So we go to the dogs and we get the dogs. We're coming back. He said, "Shut your light off." I said, "What for?" He said, "Because them agents," he said, "they can see your light from up there in that office." I said, "Look, you want me to shut my light off and walk down here in the dark, and I just stepped over a rattlesnake?" You know?
Yeah.
Do you have any rattlesnakes where you live?
Not right here. If I go north, there are, but not right here where I'm at.
Oh, man, I'm telling you, you ain't ever seen one out in the wild?
Nope.
Wait till you get someplace and have the opportunity to do that. Man, they ain't like no snake you ever seen.
Yeah.
I mean, I killed one time as big as my arm. It was big around. It was like 7 inches around, you know? And it was probably the better part of 6 foot tall.
Jeez. That's crazy.
But, yeah. And then I asked him, I said, we was getting close to his driveway. I said, "Do you have any armadillos down here?" "Oh," he said, "I've never seen one." And we were pulling in his driveway. There was one crossing the driveway. He said, "I'm telling you the truth. I've never seen one." Well, obviously they're there.
Yep.
Well, is there anything else that you'd like to ask me?
No, like I said, this is what I wanted. When we stood there at Autumn Oaks and you just told me a bunch of these stories, and actually you've told me a lot of different stories tonight. So I've enjoyed a lot of it. I think the only thing, you know, you've told me before was about the red bone. And so I've learned a lot more about you and your hunting, and I've enjoyed it. So I really appreciate you coming on, John. I've had a great time talking to you and all the great stories.
Well, I appreciate you having me on, and I've enjoyed it. And maybe we can get together.
Sounds good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
You can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Tree Talkin' Media, and until next time, keep 'em talking in the timber.